This is TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about Star Trek Picard, Episode 1, Remembrance. Welcome back, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. This is TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about the first episode of Star Trek Picard, Remembrance. Welcome to all of our new listeners as well, the ones that may not have joined us in the past who are checking us out for the Star Trek podcast. I am one of your hosts, Derek.
Hello there, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. I am one of your other hosts, John.
And rounding out the academy that is us, I am Chris.
Welcome back, everybody. We're all excited to talk about some Star Trek with Star Trek Picard.
Woo-hoo.
Definitely.
It is Stardate 22012020, and I am ready. That's about as much as I remember of really bad Star Trek puns, so.
Is that even a pun? I'm not too sure, Chris.
Well, no, even my usage of, I'm using a 24th century pun.
Okay.
It means something slightly different.
I'll get it in 200 years, 300 years, right?
Yes, exactly.
And of course, there was always, as a sort of teenager, there was always the hilarity around number one and, of course, Captain's Log.
You were a very, very dirty-minded teenager, John. Well, again, welcome back, everybody, to TV Podcast Industries. If you haven't joined us for some of our previous shows and you're jumping back on board for Star Trek Picard, make sure you subscribe to the podcast over on our website at tvpodcastindustries.com. You can also leave a voicemail over on the website there for us about any thoughts that you may have about Star Trek Picard or any of the shows that we cover, and we'll talk about them on our podcasts. We can also send any kind of feedback that you have to us at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com, or why not pop on over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries and chat about the shows that you love with us.
Yes, we would love to hear your thoughts, comments, points, theories, trivia, Easter eggs on anything to do with the Star Trek Picard. It'd be great to get your feedback and points in for our feedback section. I don't think we have a name for it, but we could always call it Captain's Log.
I thought we had a name for it. We had Communicator last week, didn't we?
Oh, that's true. Yes, it's the feedback communicator.
Yes,
Grant.
Absolutely. We do not have feedback on the first episode of Star Trek Picard because we've been lucky enough to see the episode in advance of its air date over in the US on the 23rd of January, and the UK air date, which is the 24th. Actually, I think it's airing in 200 different countries on Amazon Prime, but we'll say UK and Ireland because, as you may notice from our voices, we're not American. We are from the UK and Ireland. So we're going to be watching it on Amazon Prime when it starts coming out over here. But if you do share any feedback with us on Star Trek Picard Episode 1, we'll talk about it on our Episode 2 podcast. I think with that, it's probably time to get into our discussion about Star Trek Picard, right?
Yes, and remember, fellow Trekkers and Trekkies, it is spoiler-filled. So if you haven't watched the episode, please switch off now and come back to us later once you've looked at the first episode. Mm-hmm. So, Derek, what are some of the episode details of this episode called Remembrance?
Well, the episode's called Remembrance. Just to clarify, it's called Remembrance because of the Remembrance Day of the attack on Mars. What we found out in a short trek, this kind of 8-minute prequel episode to Star Trek Picard, this day used to be First Contact Day. And unfortunately, an attack happened on Mars, and now it's seen as Remembrance Day. It's just a kind of an overshadowing. It used to be a very popular day when people celebrated the first contact between human and aliens. Now it's a day when people remember the fall of Mars or the attack on Mars. So I just think it's interesting, just even in that title, there's a different kind of overview of how this show is going to go.
No, I agree. It straight away that this isn't your teenaged next generation. This is growing up. A grown-up next generation, and they're even changing that. They're saying, hey, you remember it as this one point from previously, now actually it's this.
Absolutely. I'd actually almost go into the octogenarian version of Star Trek. This is about a man in his older years, way after the old Star Trek Next Generation. So, yeah.
And if you want to catch that short trek Trek short. Then it's called Children of Mars.
That's right.
So go and check that out. And we covered that in our kind of preview podcast, if you want to go back to that on TV Podcast Industries, where we looked at the Children of Mars, the short trek, but also the two kind of prequel comics, Picard Countdown, as well. And the third issue of that comic will be out towards the end of January.
Yeah, 30th January. And we also talked about the European premiere of Star Trek Picard, which I was happy enough to go to.
Yeah, so if anyone's interested, you can, of course, check that out on TV Podcast Industries.
Yeah, let's get back to the details of the episode. The teleplay for this episode was written by Akiva Goldsman and James Duff, and the story was done by all of the executive producers, Akiva Goldsman, Michael Chabon, Christian Beyer, and Alex Kurtzman, with James Duff for this episode. The episode was directed by Hanelle M. Culpepper. She made her debut back in 2002 and has been a TV director since 2005. Myself and John both discussed her for her work on Gotham. She did season 3, episode 10 of Gotham, and season 4, episode 12. She also directed 2 episodes of Star Trek Discovery, which I know all 3 of us absolutely love as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love her work there. And spoiler alert, I love her work here.
Ooh.
Excellent. Well, you'll be very happy to know that she gets the first 3 episodes of Star Trek Picard. So she's the director for the first 3 episodes.
Excellent. She's going to lay the groundwork for what potentially will be 3 seasons of fun.
Or many, many more. John, do you want to give us the synopsis for this episode?
Sure. At the end of the 24th century and 14 years after his retirement from Starfleet, Jean-Luc Picard is living a quiet life on his vineyard, Chateau Picard. When he is sought out by a mysterious young woman called Dahj in need of his help, he soon realizes she may have a personal connection to his own past.
Yeah, that's one of the things I have to say I really love, just even in the synopsis there, one of the things I really love is how much connection is here to the old Next Generation. It's very much a commitment from Patrick Stewart that he didn't want to do season 8 of the Next Generation. That show finished at season 7 and had a couple of movies afterwards, but he pretty much had this commitment that he wasn't going to do an 8th season of that show. He would never have come back for that reason. But at least like they kept some connections in there to the show rather than just being direct sequel to the last thing we saw. We're seeing some just connections, which is kind of cool.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one of the really nice things about this episode is there is a lovely sentimentality about it in the sense that in Jean-Luc Picard, you get the sense of missing his former colleagues, but importantly, his friends, the people in Star Trek Next Generation that we all kind of grew up with in the 90s, or have come to since. And you do get that sense, from Patrick Stewart in the way he is portraying Picard here. And I think that's really nice. It's that you can forget about it, but just the quality of the acting, as well as how they're weaving in his former, Enterprise friends into the show means that there's plenty of that nostalgia looking back and incorporating Star Trek Next Generation, but it's not beholden to it.
Yeah.
And so I really liked sort of the choices made there for sure.
I think that's the key thing, and we can kind of get into it when we go through our main points, but this is being respectful for what came previously, but at the same time moving it forward into what TV has become in 2020 or in 2019 when it was made. It doesn't feel like they've just taken the Next Generation and moved it forward. It acts already just from 1 hour of TV. I feel that the writers, the directors, they're taking what they know and applying it to this property.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree with you, Chris. Let's get into our structure for the episodes. We are going to pick our big, medium, and small moments from the episode to talk about. Our big point is probably the big things that happen in the episode, and the medium and small points can be kind of very, very small. That could be just one line of dialogue that we liked, and could be just a medium idea or something that's come out of the episode that we're interested in. We're going to call them after the Prime Directive, the Omega Directive, and our number 1. Our small point is going to be called our number 1.
We must face the ramifications of the Prime Directive.
So let's get into it.
Yeah, good stuff. I do like that. The Prime Directive. Derek, what is your prime directive for this episode?
I'm going to start right at the start because my biggest surprise when I saw it on the big screen in London at the premiere was how much Data is actually in this episode. I had not thought that Data was going to be back. Brent Spiner playing the character of Data. I thought he was going to be on the show and have some flashback moments, but I didn't think he was going to be as central to the story as he is. And what really stood out to me was this opening sequence where we have Jean-Luc and Data on the deck of the Star Trek Enterprise. The one from the television show, not the one from the movies. We see the two of them actually playing cards against each other, something that the two of them had started to do towards the end of the season with the rest of the crew. And there's just this feeling that I got watching it. Does Picard feel that he's failed Data? The character of Data died at the end of the last movie that the two characters appeared in together. And I'm wondering whether Picard really feels like he's failed his closest friend. A lot of the Star Trek The Next Generation show was really about Data becoming a life form, becoming more and more human as he went on, and then he sacrifices himself to save the crew. Does Picard think that he could have saved him? Do they think he could have done something else? Is this a big regret for Picard? Is this why he's constantly dreaming of Data and constantly kind of looking back on his time with him? Is this why Data is leading him through all the things that are going on? We know there's no mystical connection between the two of them. We've just done a show on The Witcher, so there's a lot of mystical connections in there, but we know there's no mystical connection between these two characters. It's a science fiction show, you know, so I'm just wondering if this is part of Picard's feeling like he may have not accomplished one of the things that he felt like he should have accomplished in his life. Is that why he's having these dreams and nightmares with Data involved?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I was always taking this as well in terms of hearing about how the Federation and Starfleet responds to the attack by the rogue synths, were effectively androids and AI have effectively been banned or, you know, massively restricted. So it feels to me that, you know, in that moment, Picard knows what an android, what a synthetic can become through Data. And I think it's probably a combination of these different things about maybe because obviously Data dies, sacrifices himself to save Picard in the last movie. There's that. It's also about his legacy because now that synths are banned.
Being so tarnished, yeah.
You know, and have been tarnished by this attack on Mars. So I think all of these things really sort of press upon Picard here. And of course, I do think, like, you know, we saw it in Logan. Patrick Stewart can really just convey that sort of melancholy of regret, I think. And there's an element of regret here as well that does come through this episode. You know, in that kind of speech where he says, I've been waiting here to die when I should have been out there living. So, you know, he's kind of been wallowing, and I do like that inward self-reflection and consciousness that Picard has in this. I think that's really good. You get that sense in the comics as well, leading up to this, to give this idea that he realizes that he can maybe be too moral, or, you know, his values can almost get in the way of how he acts. And sometimes that can lead to maybe poor decisions or just difficult situations. And I like that. So I think there's an element of him feeling like he's failed Data, but also that he now wants to make that right. He's been wallowing in that and now wants to make that right.
Yeah, I do really like the conversation even between the two of them. I love Data kind of going, well, I don't really know which deception to employ here, since you figured out that my deception is not being able to deceive you.
Yeah, that was good.
It's a lovely little moment because it even shows with Jean-Luc Picard realizing, you know, this is my friend. This is the person that I know everything about. You know, he kind of goes to him. They have that gambling moment where Data's saying, I want you to put in all your money effectively. And he's saying, I don't want the game to end. If I put in all my money, then I'm all in. And that's the end of the game. I don't want to get out of this. This is absolutely him looking back on his life and going, I don't want it to end the way it seems to be going effectively. So I really like those moments.
And it's a nice little nod back to the games nights that all the officers in Star Trek Next Generation had as well. You know, we all like a good games night where, I don't know, Cards of Humanity or Exploding Kittens or whatever it is that we, you know, Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. Or just regular poker.
Or regular poker. You know, I think that's why, you know, in part, I like games nights because you have that image, and it's just that nice little nod without being too much.
Yeah.
I'm with you, Derek. I really do feel that he does feel that he failed Data. But I think it goes beyond that. I think he thinks he failed the Federation, or what was expected, or what his thoughts were of the Federation. And then going into what John says, he says, I've been living in the sidelines. I've done nothing. I should have been out there living. Part of that is as well, he should have been out there fighting for what he believed in. And I think it's not just he failed Data, he failed his responsibilities, if you will. And that comes across.
Yeah. And I think exactly what you're saying, Chris. You know, there is that moment, and John's mentioned it as well, just to kind of reiterate it as well. There is that moment where he's finding out how badly thought of the synthetics are now. He's not that he's finding out; he knows it, but it's on screen for us that the synthetics are seen as an awful idea, an awful concept. Everything's been shut down, and effectively, that's the legacy that Data was trying to live up to. He was trying to constantly prove that synthetics can be their own race. They can be as good as humans, and now they're thought of as a program that you can just shut down and stick in a box, you know. So yeah, exactly what you're saying, Chris. It feels like Picard thinks he's let down the entire synthetic race,
and beyond that, I think he thinks he's let down the future.
Well, he's also been let down by Starfleet, but I know we'll probably come to that in another point. But he's also felt very let down by Starfleet. So it's an intriguing one. Chris, do you want to take us on to your prime directive, your big moment from the episode?
So my prime directive is I'm going to steal. Usually it's John who steals the big points of our episodes, but I'm taking a play out of his book, out of his directive.
I am definitely taking out my scorebook very soon and finding out who's taking all the big points from the episode, Chris.
Yes, but I'm going to do this, which is Dahj. And the actual, the reveal. I don't want to go into, we'll speak more about her as a character and her adventures in this episode as we go along, but I actually have to just pull out the reveal of what she is, which is that she is daughter. She is Data's clone daughter.
Okay.
Which we're starting to think she is a synthetic being made from biological flesh and bone. Or that's what we're made to believe at this point.
Yes.
Based on what happens in this episode. And I was just really happy with what this is. And this story point and the way it came across. I was trying to articulate it earlier when I was thinking about it, and it's a tough one. I wasn't expecting this. I was expecting her to be the damsel in distress to a degree.
Okay.
She would have been the Will Wheaton, Will Crusher, kind of up and coming, like just as a human or something. She's done something bad, came from the wrong side of the tracks, made a few mistakes. She's taken under the wing by Picard. Then they fall into a big thing and she's pulled along on the journey. So very much I was, my expectations based on what we had seen was that she would not be central. She would be a side character. And what we found from episode 1 was that she is not only central to the plot that we assume is going to happen, she's not only central to the overall theme where we talked about the synthetics, but she's also central to the history that is the Next Generation through Data.
Yeah, definitely. I really enjoyed this as well. I like the fact that, you know, you had Picard going and doing a bit of sort of rooting around to find out what was happening. I liked how it linked to his dreams were with Data, whether it was the first dream where he's playing the poker match with Data, but also then where he's painting underneath the tree at Chateau Picard in the vineyard. And I really like then that, you know, he recognizes this painting from Data, and he goes off to the archives, and you have her face there. And this really gives the sense that Data has been creating, and has created a daughter. So it's kind of interesting as to whether she is Data's daughter, I suppose, in that sense, because these dreams of Picard, the evidence of this painting, you know, that Data has then gone and created Dahj in this image that he's painted for Picard, and maybe in some ways then this is Data's daughter. But you have that really interesting moment at the Daystrom Institute in Japan, where you have this mention of someone who has gone missing, this Bruce Maddox as well, who, while Data may have not created her, he or his parts, his kind of technology and what he had become have ultimately led to this Bruce Maddox maybe creating Dahj.
Well, that's what I find really interesting. It's kind of the murder mystery Agatha Christie aspect here. I love this idea of, in his dreams, Captain Picard seeing the painting of Dahj that Data's doing without a face, and then he instantly connects it and then goes across the world, finds the painting, and it's completely in a sealed room. It's like one of those really good mysteries. You know, has anybody ever been in this room? Nobody's been here since the last time you were here. But how did she possibly have the face that Data painted almost 30 years ago? Well, it can only be possible if he has some aspect of actual Data, not even the other version of Data, B4, that is referenced in the show, this other version of the android Data. It has to be Data's mind that this guy, Bruce Maddox, has access to. Well, how is that possible since Data was destroyed almost 20 years ago? You know, I love this mystery that's in there that leads into Dahj and, let's say it now, her twin sister, because she does have a twin sister. We say Dahj is going to be really important in the series. Unfortunately, Dahj dies at the end of this episode. I have to say, one other thing from the premiere, seeing Issa Briones, who plays this character, coming out directly afterwards going, oh, thank you, I can finally say it. I'm not playing Dahj. I only played her in one episode. Now I get to play a completely different character for the rest of the season. You don't know how difficult it is to keep that kind of secret from everybody in the Star Trek universe who's been asking me all about this character. She had to make up stuff so that she was hiding this whole idea that this character died, and it came as a complete shock to me. I did not expect it in that moment at all. She'd been kick-ass throughout the episode, so I was quite impressed that they were able to keep that secret.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I wonder where they're going to go with this, because having watched some of the kind of some of the hype train leading up to this, I've seen some of her bits where she's discussed being Dahj and things like that, and I'm like, oh well, that was all not true. Or she comes back. But it does, I've made the joke a few times with the boys now over in some of our messages. What happened to Kaj, Baj, Aj, Maj, Laj? Like, are we talking A to Z here? Because they're twins. So how many more have been built? Like, are we going to get that scene at some point where it's just an army of them all Picard goes into a room and they're just all there with different, like, slightly different clothes superimposed on them, and they're all just like, hello, hello, hello.
I must admit, I've seen this joke a couple of times from you, Chris, and I even mentioned it earlier on. I still don't get the joke, but we do find out that her sister's called Soji. She's got a completely different name. So there is only twins. We're told that by Dr. Agnes Jurati, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. But when an android is created in the style that this character creates, we're told that he has to create two at a time. That's why we know that there is a sister. I think, John, you're going to talk a little bit about her and a little bit about the end of the episode as well, and your big point.
Yeah, I mean, my big point is, and this is where I do have some contention with Chris. I think this is the big point, but it is the Borg ship. But that and importantly, it's being salvaged by the Romulans. So, I mean, for me, this ship contains a number of just like wow moments. I mean, firstly, the Borg ship, the Borg. I like the fact that in the opening sequence, there is the Borg ship as well, kind of, I suppose, hiding in plain sight, if you will.
Mm-hmm. It's in the opening credits.
Yeah, in the opening credits. You then just have the Romulan warship flying into there. And again, for me, having the Romulans involved in this series is just really, really good because they are mysterious and it always kind of makes me want to know more about them. And I always felt that they were underutilized, I suppose.
It's really funny. I was listening to a Star Trek podcast the other day, just previewing the show. And do you know, in Star Trek fandom, the Romulans are known as the boring characters.
Oh, really?
So the actors and everybody, they all thought Romulans are boring. They're just kind of evil versions of the Vulcans, and that's it. There's no other character development. So they've been trying to make these characters really interesting from the start, and I think they're going to make it this season.
No, absolutely. They also carried off shoulder pads like you would not believe in the Next Generation. If we could all do that, I think we can learn something from the Romulans with respect to that.
Hey, we lived through the 80s, John. We know what shoulder pads are like.
I mean, I get the whole boring thing, but it's just because, the society of the Romulans is so secretive. Mm-hmm. But when they've kind of, the writers have delved into that to break that down, to see that actually they're not. I just think they're really interesting. And it's because they're underutilized. I always kind of wanted to know more about this race that was deemed, probably second to the Klingons to be the biggest threat to the Federation. Mm-hmm. And they were just kind of ignored. So it was kind of like, well, are they really such a big threat? So I'm really glad that it's the Romulans. I think certainly, yes, they will be given a makeover, and certainly have, because, we see these men in black, these kind of troopers in black as well, sort of phasing onto planet Earth to try and capture Dahj. And ultimately, we see that these are Romulans as well, trying to pick her up. And that's because, again, this Borg ship holds another massive secret, which is that here is Soji, who is Dahj's twin sister. Because we learn at this Daystrom Institute that they have to be created in pairs. So there is a twin.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's interesting why one is there on the Borg ship, with Romulans working for the Romulan Empire, and the other was on Earth as a sort of mild-mannered AI student from Seattle. And, why are they in completely different places? So,
and the other big reveal of it, that Soji knows all about her sister.
Yeah.
She knows she's a sister, whereas Dahj didn't know that at all. She thought she was just a kid from Seattle.
Exactly. And we also get to see Harry Treadway here as the Romulan Narek, which is really good to see. And I think even just from how he is portraying a Romulan, he certainly is coming across as one of the grooviest, most relaxed Romulans ever to have been captured on and in the Star Trek universe.
I certainly got a feeling at that moment when he said, my brother's gone. He's been dead a year. I was wondering, did he murder his brother, or did someone murder his brother and he's about to take revenge on them? There's one of those two things happening.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm so glad that they actually did this reveal at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We straight away know where the assumption is that this is the same Borg cube that blew up, that they're pulling it together again, because it looks unfinished, like there's chunks taken out of it. So my assumption, I know what they say about making assumptions, you make an ass out of everyone else. But I'm assuming that's where this is. So the Doctor is now working with the Romulans because they're on that ship. It's where synthetics aren't outlawed on probably on the Romulus reclamation part or planet or what the reclamation center that they're building.
Right. Okay.
That's my assumption, that like he's able to do his experiments there because he's with the Romulans, and they found Data's body or cells on that Borg ship because it exploded. They're pulling it back together. That's becoming their refugee camp, if you will. And I'm assuming that, or I'm thinking that because the Romulan population or species was probably decimated by this explosion to a degree, that they're probably allowing some of the synthetic pieces this to go on because there is so few of them. They need help rebuilding.
Yeah.
I think that's where they'll go with it.
Well, it's an interesting one as well. Derek had a theory which I thought was quite Machiavellian and would link quite nicely with the Romulan frame of mind.
Yeah, I had this theory, and it was John actually that pointed out the Romulan reclamation site is what the location is said to be right before we see the Borg ship. So I feel like they're salvaging parts to come back as a race. So remember what's happened. If I know it gets a bit complex in the episode if you haven't read anything beforehand and haven't read any of the comic books. So in the episode, what we hear is that there was a supernova that was about to wipe out all of Romulan space and all of the Romulans. And Admiral Picard at the time was leading an operation to clear them all out and move them to new planets that they hadn't lived on before to get them out of the exploding zone of the supernova. So he was pulled away from that by Starfleet, who made him come back away from the reclamation effort. And I feel like what's happened is the supernova went ahead, as everybody thought it was going to, killing millions more people than could have been saved by Picard. And what we've got left now is a small number of Romulans who are now pretty pissed off with Starfleet because Starfleet are the ones that made them pull away. And in the past, we know that the relationship between the Romulans and Starfleet has always been pretty bad. This could have potentially been the bridge that brought them together, but by them pulling Picard and his people out, the ones that are left possibly could now be rebuilding themselves as a society by harvesting what was available from this Borg ship and other Borg ships to kind of build themselves back up.
Yeah, and there was also a little bit extra, which was the Machiavellian part, I thought, which was that the synth attack on Mars could have been initiated by the Romulans. So that they effectively are ahead of the game and now having Borg technology against the Federation that has effectively outlawed synthetics.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other bit is, are Romulans
that Machiavellian? I suppose.
Well, yeah, but also are they? So this is where I'm going to need. I'm going to have to probably bone up on a bit more of the story and everything. But are the Borg as a species, because the Queen dies, are the Borg gone? Are they no longer an enemy? Are they no longer around? Because when at the end of the end of First Contact, the Queen dies. If they're gone, is this a way to bring them back in? Because then they start combining synthetic Borg and Romulan into one?
Maybe.
Or is it becomes where the Romulans are using the synthetics, and then the Borg can join, and you've got a brand new, fully synthetic Borg that's made out of flesh and blood. It's just interesting. Yeah. I'm curious where they're going to go with this. Again, we're 1 hour in. So
absolutely, yeah, 1 hour in and 3 into our Prime Directive. Let's get on to our Omega Directive, some medium moments from the episode.
Implement the Omega Directive immediately.
My one, we've already talked quite a lot about this already, so I'm not going to harp on about it, but I just really liked Dr. Agnes Jurati over the Daystrom Institute, her conversations with Picard about the rogue synths. I just really thought it was impressive work by both actors here, because she's very impressed with Picard. She obviously lets him in the door because of who he is, basically, and then kind of has some nice back and forth joking with him about the fact that what he's saying is impossible. It definitely won't happen. I promise you it won't happen. Oh, you've got a good theory there, but that can't happen because this guy disappeared. And I think everybody knows in the Star Trek universe, when someone disappears and goes into hiding, likely we're probably going to see them later on in the season, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's very likely that Bruce Maddox, her former boss, is the one responsible for creating Dahj and her sister Soji. The plans are quite clear that that's what's happened, but I love how incredulous Dr. Jurati could possibly be. This can't possibly happen. He only went off with all of these ideas in his head, knowing exactly how to fulfill it, and went out of the universe, and we've never seen him again. And there's now evidence that he has created it. So I guess all of that stuff has come to pass. Also, the actress that plays Agnes Jurati, you may remember her from Scott Pilgrim versus the World. She was the drummer in his band, which I just thought was quite interesting to see her in this more serious role. But I did really like her. I haven't seen her in a couple of years, so it was really cool.
This was a nice little interaction with Picard. And again, it just added the layers around, the fact that all these programs around synthetics, AI, androids have all kind of been shut down within Starfleet and the Federation, or at least on Earth. And so like in a sense, if you think of the competing empires or the competing worlds, like with Romulans, with Cardassians, with the Klingons, that in effect in that race of technology, then the Federation is at a complete disadvantage now, maybe compared to those other races. And so this was really nice. I also liked just the idea that the Institute was there in Japan. It made the world feels smaller. The fact that you can beam into different parts of the world by walking through those doorways. And of course, yes, the big mystery of Bruce Maddox, and where has he disappeared to? Will he be found forced against his will to be helping the Romulans in the Borg ship, maybe? Or is Maddox some kind of infiltration into Earth anyway previously? Again, there's still a lot to uncover here, but it's nice that, we've got so many sort of crumb trails here going on, what with Maddox, but also with Dahj and with Picard and the dreams of Picard with data in them. That it's just nicely, as you say, murder mystery in that sense. I really enjoyed that. Just again, any show that gives you intrigue like that is good, and you really want to see Picard going out there and finding out this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Also, Dr. Jurati did have my favorite line in the episode. We're about to come round to that. No, I promised you earlier on. Which I just thought was quite fun.
I think she's going to be bad.
Dr. Jurati?
Yeah, I think she's going to be... I think it will turn out that she's involved in it somehow. It's that kind of... She's been working in the background with Dr. Maddox, or Dr. Maddox is dead, and she's been running the experiments in the background while keeping her professional career alive, because this is her daughter as well, because she was working so much with Maddox.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of regret in her voice when she was showing him around, and it's kind of, two people in the room in a dusty lab that's not allowed to do any experiments at all. They're told that they can just do everything in their head.
Yeah, it's all simulations.
Yeah, and then when she showed off the old data unit, that just got a bells ringing for me.
Yeah.
Not alarm bells, but more, there's more to this character. I don't mean in the fact that, like, she'll be underutilized or anything. It's more, I don't see her as just being the knowledgeable doctor on Sins.
Right.
She will be more central to
exactly.
it.
Like, and rogue scientists have always played a big part in Star Trek. Dreaming, whether it's the movie or the TV shows, that rogue scientist, and certainly one where effectively her type of research has been absolutely restricted to the point where, as you say, she is almost thinking back longingly about the time before when they could actually create these things, and now it's all just models and simulations in a computer, rather than being able to create androids, synthetics, and push the boundaries of the physical aspect of what the artificial intelligence and the technology can do. So maybe then it's, well, she was given the offer by the Romulans or whoever to help out. So maybe she, coshed old Maddox on the back of the head and shipped him off to the Romulans.
Right. I'm going to be a bit more positive in this one because this is Star Trek following on the story of Picard here. So I'm really hopeful that Agnes Jurati is the positive scientist who is the guide to help them find Bruce Maddox, who's the evil scientist. Because I'm really hopeful that we've got another new scientist. Science has always played such a major role in Star Trek and the history of Star Trek. And science is treated very positively for the most part in the show. This idea that this person's work has been shut down, but she's still keeping it going and still keeping the ideas flowing is also quite a positive idea. So I'm hoping she's just another member of his crew maybe to go out and help him find Bruce Maddox. That's what I'm hoping for. But John, do you want to take us on to your medium moment from the episode?
Yes. She's activating, where Dahj goes from basically an AI major student from Seattle to a kick-ass operative of something, or a rogue synth, which was what I was thinking at the time. And I know then, it connects in with Data and potentially with Maddox. So her storyline does sort of progress there very quickly. But I thought this opening was really good with the three kind of SWAT team, as we later find out, Romulans coming in and trying to effectively take her memory or to kidnap her. It seems like they were trying to kidnap her, given what Soji says right at the end. But I really like where she just kind of goes into autopilot in terms of defending herself from these three Romulans. Unfortunately, her boyfriend does get a sort of Romulan knife to the chest. Yeah. And doesn't make it out alive. But, this is the thing that kicks it off. And it was just a nice little moment going from this couple on the sofa to these three guys materializing in her apartment. Again, the dangers of transporter technology. Absolutely. Can you imagine if you got it wrong? It's a good job it wasn't the bedroom, actually.
Yeah, or 20 minutes later, exactly.
Exactly. And then all of a sudden, sort of effectively she's this like secret agent, sort of kick-ass ninja of some description. And of course, the other thing with these guys in black that came to, we do find out that they are Romulan, and they have kind of, it's almost like that Nazi thing with, rather than the cyanide pill, the crack of acid or whatever it was, as well as their weaponry be able to sort of self-destruct, which I thought was quite cool. We see that later on, but this was a nice moment, I think, just to kick her off into having to go on the run, and having that image of Picard flash into her mind as the Romulans are trying to determine whether she's been activated or not. Yeah. And it's interesting because I did then think she was just an upgraded form of Data, in a sense. I wasn't really thinking of living tissue androids, right, or synthetic. I was thinking that maybe like Terminator, there was an outer biological layer. But then you start to realize that the whole technology has moved on since Data. So, I thought this was a really good opening. I like the bit of action as well, of this new character, short-lived as though she may be. Yeah. A little Jason Bourne moment there, really. Yeah, exactly. Kind of been awakened and doesn't know her past. I do like the touch though, and you kind of mentioned it there though, John. I do like the touch in here that the technology can only move on from Data, because Data is such a unique specimen that they can't create anything like him without going back to the original Data. And now that he's gone, nobody would be able to
continue those leaps in science, because Data was a leap in science in himself. So I kind of like that idea that Dahj has to have been created from Data because there's nobody else that could be like her if they didn't start at that starting point. I just think that's an interesting piece to the whole mythology of who Data is, I suppose.
Yeah, I just love the overall kind of the strangeness of when Dahj goes from, like you said, the AI Major to Lieutenant Kickass. She does it quite well.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of almost, what the hell just happened to me?
Yeah, exactly.
Issa she portrays that kind of like, why am I holding this weapon? What's going on?
Yeah, she even describes that to Jean-Luc later on, where she says that when the hood came off, it was like I was in the eye of a storm. It was like I was at the edge of a hurricane. You know, that everything around me was destroyed in the room. You know, she doesn't even realize how much she's done. And I guess if she's activated, possibly she doesn't know what's just happened. So yeah, I kind of like that.
What I really thought was happening when they were saying she's activating, I was thinking it's very much like all these sleeper.
Yeah.
Do you remember like there's the Americans, that TV show where it's all about sleeper agents and things like that? So I'm really interested to see who else can activate.
Yeah.
Or like, can you imagine like we get the scene in later episodes where it's a whole room activates?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's why I was thinking it was a rogue synth, that they had maybe planted more of them in the society on Earth, and that this, because again, at this moment in time, the three kind of military sort of people that have just transported in, you think they're human.
Yeah.
For me, I just thought she's a synthetic, she's a rogue synthetic, and they're trying to clean up all these different people that have been put as, like Jason Bourne sleeper agents within society.
Blade Runner then, you think?
Yeah, almost like that, exactly. So I thought that was really good. And then you realize, it's a different narrative that's about to come out. So I really, really enjoyed, this element. And I think it was a good punchy start to Picard.
Mm-hmm.
I will pose the question to you guys. Is her mother a computer program, or is her mother a real person? Because the reason I posit this to you very quickly is if the mother's on the Borg cube, that's a real long distance call.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's and I get the sense of, potentially we'll find out that the mother is just a data-like AI in the cloud.
Well, let's say that particular call that she makes, that's definitely a computerized person, because you see it change direction in the way that it's saying something when she gets the piece of information from Dahj. Dahj says, I left a safe place because I didn't want to put them in danger. And you see a kind of why don't you go back to Picard?
Twitch.
Yeah, it's kind of that twitch, retrieving information kind of thing. So I don't know whether her mother exists at all. You hear that conversation between Dahj and Picard where he says to her, that's a lovely memory to have, but it's not real, basically. It's not a true memory. It's implanted in your brain, but he's much more polite about it than I am. But he's kind of saying, nothing that she's saying may have actually taken place. They may all be implanted memories. She may have only arrived on Earth a month or two beforehand, we don't know any of this, but she believes all of it. She believes all of those things about her past. That phone call to her mother could be phone call to headquarters to get information, and they activate her effectively. You see that with the conversation where immediately afterwards she says, just stare into it, look for Picard, you need to find Picard. And then suddenly she's able to do those massively fast moves on the computer to find Picard on Earth, which he says is impossible for anybody else to do. So yeah, it feels to me that at least that communication between the two, it's a computer talking to Dahj.
Yeah. I'm going to jump in here and bring in my medium point, my Omega directive, which is very much the fight scene on the roof. And yes, this was a deadly fight scene. Like we don't need to say too much about it because cool. It was so cool on all levels. It was great choreography, great stunt acting. They didn't make her too superhuman, aside from one very long jump.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I kind of went, okay, let's see where this goes.
With that, yeah.
But it's not going to go anywhere. Dahj is no more. What I did like, and I'm going to call this out now, which is they didn't age down Picard.
Mm-hmm.
And by this, I mean, Picard is not didn't jump into old Picard, not gun-toting, but like, Picard could throw a punch back then in Next Generation.
After season 3, I think, yeah.
Yeah. So, they didn't, to be fair, Patrick Stewart is just around 5 years, older than, say, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Right. That's a strange comparative, Chris. I just say he's 79 years old. That's such a strange comparison to say he's 5 years older than Arnie.
Well, by the comparison, what I'm trying to get is like in the Expendables,
okay,
or in the latest Terminator, they had someone acting in Arnold's steed.
Right.
Who, and they kind of just did a bit of CGI to make it look like him, and he was his gun-toting self.
Oh dear, okay.
So, now, even though Arnold Schwarzenegger probably can't he's a specimen still, but, he's an old man, he's 75, I think,
Arnold Schwarzenegger's not 75, is he?
Arnold Schwarzenegger is 70, or around 75, I think.
Wow, okay.
Or just under,
okay.
yeah.
Well, just one other thing that did come out recently about the character of Jean-Luc Picard is 92 years old in this universe. The actor is 79, so there is even a difference in their two ages. So he is actually aged up in the show. That's why you see that his eyebrows are almost white. And when you do see Patrick Stewart, he has grey eyebrows. So he is aged up on the show as well. I think that's quite an interesting point too.
Exactly. And that is cool. But what I enjoyed even more is where he's an old man and they had him up the stairs, and by the end of it, he's like, I can't do any much.
Yeah.
And she has to grab him, physically pull him the remaining couple of flights.
I was definitely in the cinema going, please don't make Patrick Stewart run around, the poor guy. Don't make him run. He seems fine. He seems fit. Don't get me wrong. He's probably fitter than I am, to be honest. But it does seem a moment you're like, he doesn't need to run in these scenes.
Yeah.
Just cut to another scene. It's fine.
Exactly. And I just thought that was my big kind of Omega directive. It's,
he's acting age appropriate for the character in that sense.
And they're treating the character the same as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Picard is not going to be in. There was always one worry. Worry is a wrong word. It's again too strong. But one bit I had about this is that they were going to make him. I don't even know. He would be running around a bit. He would be shooting all the weapons, the phasers, everything, and a bit like there's that scene in the trailer where we see 7 of 9 doing her dual wielding guns.
Yes.
And I had a slight concern. There you go. That's better than, it's not a worry. It was a slight concern that they may at some point make Picard a bit like that. Right. So where you, like a captain of a pirate ship, he has to kind of be a bit ruthless and kind of take a few guns out. But no, he's age appropriate.
Yeah, and I just don't think it would be true to the
that.
character as well if they did that too. You know, Star Trek Next Generation did generally have Picard on the bridge, and he sent a team out to do the work. You know, that he was a delegator, he was a proper manager of people. You know, while he did go out on away missions quite often, it was about him talking to people to get them to do the things he needed them to do. There wasn't a huge amount of fighting from Picard. Most of his team got into fistfights, but not usually from him. So I'm glad they did that. One other thing I want to call out about that scene, though, Chris, you did say some of the stunt work's amazing. I think that scene where Dahj throws one of the guys over her shoulder, he looks like he cracks his back on one of the bars.
Doesn't he? On the bar?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to point it out because that's great stunt work. I hope the guy's okay, but if he's allowed to be kept in and spent a couple of weeks in traction and he's fine now, well done, well worth it.
Again, another really good bit of action because the fighting was just superb. There were, like, she chucks another one over the edge as well. There were a few, and I think cracks another one on the staircase as well. So there's some really good sort of takedown moments from Dahj in this. And again, here we get to finally see that they're Romulans as well. Maybe from the Tal Shiar, in terms of maybe their sort of elite fighting force rather than the spy network.
Right.
So I really, that was really good. And then you were like going, okay, this is where the Romulans are coming in.
Yeah.
Excellent. And, you know, not really understanding how or what that meant until it's kind of, okay, let's zoom in on this Romulan warship.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's going into a bigger vessel.
Mm-hmm.
What's this bigger vessel? it's the Borg ship.
Exactly.
Or a reclaimed Borg ship. So we're like, whoa, okay.
A Borg
So-
ship they're taking apart to its very core. Yeah.
This was the, you know, this fight was good in that, not only was it good for Picard in how he was kind of responding to the action, but you saw kick-ass Dahj, who also then we see, killed off, and you're like going, oh, okay. It's only because of the conversation at Daystrom that you're going to go, oh, there must be another.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're like, they're going, oh my goodness, she's gone. And you thought this was going to be the through thread for the rest of the series.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Really good scene. I must say, I really enjoyed that. I think it's number one time.
Make it so, number one.
Just a small moment about the episode to talk about. We've talked about a lot of the episodes, so I don't want to go back over multiple things. But just, I have to say, I liked our first introduction to Picard on Earth in Chateau Picard, where he has his vineyard. I love there's moments there where you see him getting slightly angry about things that are going on and drinking a couple of glasses of wine, you know. We have Loris and Chabon, who are working with Picard. We know them from the comic books, John. We've talked about them on our comic book chat. They're kind of two Romulan refugees who have attached themselves onto Picard. They've been working for him for about 12 years now at this stage, I think, somewhere between 12 and 14 years. But so I like their relationship. You know, they're almost like old school housekeepers, dealing with the boss, basically, but they have a good little ribbing of him. Occasionally, I love, you know, even Laura saying to him, go upstairs and wash your hands. It's been 12 years and I still have to remind you every day. And then I also like the really old reference. It's a nice little gag where he's now drinking tea Earl Grey decaf, because tea Earl Grey hot used to be his old drink, but he can't drink caffeinated tea anymore.
Yeah, no, that was good.
Even though it does solve all of life's little problems, as he also points out to Dahj later on. So I like that too.
Yeah, although to be honest, he might not be taking a lot of caffeine, but wow, the size of that glass of wine that he was drinking.
It was the size of his head.
Yeah, it's certainly taking on a bit of alcohol.
Yeah.
But why wouldn't you when you've got your vineyard laid out before you? The family homestead.
Absolutely. He has to test every barrel, right? Isn't that the deal? If you own your own vineyard, you have to test one glass out of every barrel.
Surely that is the rule.
And the glass must be the size of your head. What do you guys think of Loris and Chabon?
I really like them. I think certainly just sort of being introduced to them in the Romulan Empire, one of the worlds being evacuated by Picard from the Star Trek Picard sort of prequel comics, then there was a little familiarity with them there. I suppose for me, I really like their interaction. Again, I'm now beginning to wonder, because they were members of the Tal Shiar. So again, I'm just like, I mean, not every Romulan can be evil, can they? You know, I'm just wondering.
In fact, we know not everyone is, because there was a storyline with Spock going to the Romulans and being treated very well, and
exactly
Picard going there. There is a respect for Picard within some of the Romulans as well.
But I'm just wondering, when you said about the theory that you had and the idea that maybe this is some kind of, you know, knowing that their home world was going to get consumed by this supernova, that they decided, well, we need to find a new empire. We can take the Federation if we, you know, there's so, as I say, there's some kind of really sort of evil, nasty plan underneath this, and maybe having two Tal Shiar agents in with Admiral Picard, that could be one of the things that they need here. So I think they're great characters for sure, and I hope they are, you know, good in that sense. I did kind of like their interaction with Picard in Chateau.
Yeah.
In the Chateau.
And I love that Loris has an Irish accent as well. That's quite cool too.
Yeah. One thing I'll point out is I haven't read the comics. So I knew they were Romulan, and I knew Picard had helped them, quote unquote, somehow. Yeah. But that's all we know from
exactly.
This.
Yes, and we don't know a huge amount more from the comic books either. To be fair, there's not a massive amount of extra stuff. They've just built a little bit of a story, showing their first introduction.
Yeah, no, so it's just interesting. So as a first introduction on the TV show, yeah, they're cool. Mm-hmm. I like their relationship with Picard. But until we know more, yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes.
Welcome to TV podcast industries where everybody's a suspect until they're not. I like it.
Or even when they're not,
we're still going to think that they might be. Yes, exactly. Chris, they usher him off to a special meeting in the chateau. I know that this is your small moment for the episode.
My number one. Mm-hmm. Yes, my number one is, Basil exposition. If I was to be critical of any moment in this episode, it was this TV interview. I understand why they had to do it. I understand why they did it the way they did. Because they needed to, in a short amount of time, explain what has happened, where Picard is, and his feelings. So it was I don't know whether it was the writing or the setting of the kind of it as being a TV interview, because the way so before the interview starts, he goes, "Did you remind her not to talk?" And she goes, "Yes, they're not going to talk about that one thing." And I'm like, okay, they're going to bring that one thing up.
Yes,
yeah, exactly. It was signposted, and not subtly.
Yeah.
So for me, this just felt very story sledgehammer. In that I felt potential. I don't know. Again, I'm not like, we discuss these things. I've never said, or I can never claim that I will ever have better ideas, but for this part, it just felt a bit too Basil exposition for me. It was just, and sorry, for our new TV podcast listeners who are joining us for your first show, by Basil exposition, what I mean, because I say across a lot of our shows.
We use it a lot, don't we?
Yeah, it's I forget. It's from a TV show in the UK. I can't remember which one.
Chris, it's from Austin Powers.
Oh, there you go. Basil exposition, Austin Powers. There you go. It's that trope where a character or a scene basically is just put in to give you all the background and the story very quickly in a very short amount of time, and it basically doesn't move the story forward. It's not done well. It's just shoved in.
Yeah. I think the way I'd probably describe it is that it's serving the writers to get them from point A to point B quickly, as opposed to serving the audience to present them something that's really exciting to watch. Because it's not that exciting to watch an interview. It's only exciting at the point when Picard pushes back, because you see how violently angry in his soul he is that Starfleet pulled the plug from under him and closed ranks and pulled back to the Earth and stopped going out in the universe and protecting people. I do love that part of the scene.
Yeah,
early on in the scene, when there's a lot of exposition being thrown out, as you say, when she's getting the entire universe up to speed on the last 20 years. It's not a great part of the scene, but I do love his reaction to it.
You know, and it's kind of one of those things that it did needed to be done. And I think, like, if you've not watched the short trek, you haven't read the two sort of prelude comics, well, then there are certain aspects about this that have to be brought to the attention of the viewer. It's the wrong way to say it. It's kind of the necessary evil to have a short, sharp burst of exposition, as you say, to get the writers from point A to point B. And I would agree with you, Chris. It's like, it did just feel just plonked in there. I'm not too sure whether the character of Picard would be doing an interview like this and then having the signpost not to talk about this. Although I was intrigued, this idea of the separation from the Starfleet, because of course, the Starfleet the Federation is such a big part of Jean-Luc Picard's life that you're kind of going, okay, what has happened? That fallout from the attack on Mars, the pulling of the plug of this great sort of rescue armada, like, he makes that reference to Dunkirk and so on. That, okay, and it does link into to Data, but it's just the vehicle of a TV interview maybe just didn't feel right. It could have been a friend visiting him, or even, I don't know, Loris and Zebon just mentioning something and getting that bit of exposition in something that feels a bit more natural to what we had seen up till then. However, yes, him getting sort of frustrated and angry, like the clenching of the fists and so on. I really enjoyed that final bit, and just understanding a bit more as well, about his separation from Starfleet then, what was fine to me, but, it did just feel like a TV crew had turned up at Chateau Picard to do an interview for no particular reason, but well,
it was the anniversary of Remembrance
exactly.
Day.
The episode's called Remembrance.
But still, like, it felt shoehorned a little.
But still, that's the thing. Yeah, like for me, I would have done it with Dahj. I would have used her. Yeah. I don't know how she would have found him, or like you could have found something other, but you could have had her speaking with Loris and Zaban, and Picard at a table. Picard losing the cool slightly because Dahj keeps pressing him over. So I can't. The writers are better than this to me. It just felt slightly off, but it served its purpose, and I don't think it will happen again.
I think the option here was to either go and do something like this, dump it right at the start, give everybody the information they need, and just move on with the story, or do what so many other shows do these days if you're doing a sequel to something that's gone a couple of years ago, which is, but why is Picard left? Oh, we're not telling you that until episode 7 of the show. So I'm really glad they just went, right, here's what happened. If you want any more detail on it, go read the comic books and go see the short trek. That'll give you some more information on it. Otherwise, let's kick on with the story, and you'll get some more details and more beats in the background. But I know what you mean, Chris. It's one of those things that unfortunately has to happen sometimes. John, what's your number one, your little point about this episode?
I think for me, it was spending time just on Federation Earth. So many times in Star Trek, particularly in the movies, you're just at Starfleet Academy, or you're at a Starfleet sort of building or warehouse or installation or facility or whatever. And I really felt it was quite nice that effectively until the final bit, this was all on Earth. We go from Chateau Picard in France, we see Dahj in Paris, and we see Picard going to San Francisco and to the Starfleet archives to kind of uncover this mystery, then to the Daystrom Institute in Okinawa, Japan. And you really got a sense of how this Earth is different from where we live at the moment. That this idea of a future Earth, that, institutes are global now. Travel is global, but in an instant. That the Earth effectively has been shrunk through being able to travel through the transporters.
I bet you people would still be late for work, though.
I'm sure they would.
Oh, of course.
But, they'll all be still trying to take a sickie. But I thought this was really, really nice to just spend some time on Federation Earth and see how Earth is different, not just other cultures, because I just don't feel we've really had a lot of that, really, sort of in the past. So I thought this was just time really well spent going around different parts of the world, and understanding Earth. Even in Dahj's apartment with the other, with her boyfriend. All of this just
Boston, wasn't it?
Yeah, in Boston. This all just felt really kind of normal in a sense, and it was just really nice, but part of the Federation. So that's kind of my small point, was just to get to spend time on Earth.
Absolutely. We've heard about it kind of being the center of Starfleet so often. It's kind of nice that they have done a lot of work on Earth to make it, a working planet where you can move around really easily, and there's loads of stuff all over the planet. So I think that's quite cool. Yeah. And finally, after our big point, medium point, and small point, any kind of Easter eggs and stuff that we've seen in the episode. Chris, have you seen one there?
Well, I don't have an Easter egg, or it's my kind of really just tiny note is just that opening credits theme, and just the opening credits as a whole. It's amazing. I just wanted to call it out, and it was straight away. It didn't tug on my heartstrings. It boldly transported me where no man has gone before. No. But, jokes aside, it was just really good. The crawl itself, the animation, yes, it gave away some Easter eggs, now that we've seen the episode. But, i.e. the Borg cube and then the little, cells or the machines, the nanobots. But as a whole, the credits looked amazing, but it's just the theme music got me. And I was trying to figure out why. I was just like, okay, it's just the atmospheric music throughout the show was good. I was like, okay. So I looked into it, and the actual, composer and conductor for Picard is a gentleman named Jeff Russo. And you may not know the name, but you know his work, because he's done every episode. He's composer and conductor for every episode of Fargo. He has done every episode of Altered Carbon and Umbrella Academy, which have some amazing songs and music and compositions in it. He's done Legion.
Well, there you go.
All of Legion. So think of the Bollywood scene alone. That is a hat tip. But
it's classic music in that show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But the biggest one is he did Star Trek Discovery.
Fantastic, of course.
And the theme song in the opening theme of Star Trek Discovery. And that was one that I'm in awe of. That still, it brought kind of parts of kind of my childhood back because of the original Star Trek. It's so close to it.
Yeah.
And this opening theme for Picard is something similar. Like it probably calls on Next Generation, but just doesn't at the same time. It's its own beast. And I think that's what this show is. So with an opening credit theme, he's called back to the Next Generation, but made it its own beast.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a massive hat tip. Kudos. The biggest bona fides, whatever you want to call Jeff Russo, you are the man.
It's a really good theme. Definitely really looking forward to it on the other 9 episodes of the show. Other Easter eggs from the episode, we have missed loads, I promise. I've written down a bunch that I remember from seeing the episode, but our fellow listeners, our fellow Trekkies and Trekkers, send in any ones that you've seen from the episode that I've missed here. But I was just really impressed when they went into the Starfleet archives. As a fan of Next Generation, seeing Captain Picard walk into this room full of all these memories from the show and from the movies, I just think is really cute.
Definitely.
It's a really nice moment that the Captain Picard Day banner that's in the background, the kids on the Starship Enterprise used to have a day every year where they created artwork for Captain Picard, and that was one of the banners they created. So even though he always protested about it, it was only shown in the show, I think, once, but even though he protested about the idea of the kids worshipping him as their hero, he still keeps the banner in his little archive. I think that's very cute. You also see the Enterprise E, the one that was from First Contact and Insurrection. You see a model of that in there. He's always had models of his little spaceships over the years, so nice to see some models in there as well. Another spaceship model that he has in there, there's a ship with 4 nacelles. They're kind of the engines on the back of the ship. That was Picard's first ship, the Stargazer. I thought that was quite a nice little touch.
Yeah, definitely.
The only thing is just to build on what you were saying about you mentioned it before, Derek, that the attack on Mars took place on the same date as First Contact, which was made with Zephram Cochrane when he first met the Vulcans, and you get the you get warp drive for the first time, that first successful launch, and they used to celebrate this First Contact Day, but now it's Remembrance Day for the victims of the attack on Mars. Yeah. So it's that double-edged sword of celebration and remembrance here of both the contact day and first contact day and Remembrance Day.
First attack day, possibly by the Romulans. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull the date out of the back of my head. I think it's April 4th. Someone's going to correct me on that, but I think it's April 4th. Is the date of that day. Guys, overall, what did you think of Star Trek Picard Episode 1, Remembrance, John?
Well, in the spirit of Jean-Luc Picard, I would give this 4 massive glasses of Chateau Picard red wine out of 5. I just thought this was a really nicely paced opener with doffing of the cap to Data, and I liked how that was done through a dream sequence. The shock of Dahj potentially being an android of flesh and bone, almost a biological android or synthetic, if those two terms aren't a contradiction, and then being destroyed through that kind of acid pill that the Romulan military sort of kidnapper had taken. I think absolutely sort of coming back to see the Borg ship and the lovely surprises held within it. It was almost kind of like a Borg Christmas present under the Christmas tree, wasn't it? Really, it just needed a bow on it. But with the Romulans in the reclaiming technology, you have Dahj's twin sister here, Sergi. You've got Harry Treadway. As I say, being, dare I say it, probably one of the coolest Romulans ever to grace the screen, but also just this mystery now around Bruce Maddox. You know, for me, I thought it was going to be that mystery of Dahj, and she was going to be this through line, and now it's more likely to be her twin sister and the mystery surrounding Maddox. I have no idea whether that will be the case or not, but again, it's the intrigue. And of course, for me, Patrick Stewart just embodies this character so well. And as I say, I think, knowing what he had done in Logan and knowing he was doing this, I was excited because, he just plays an aged Picard in retirement, angry with himself, still wanting to do more, just so well. So I absolutely really enjoyed this opener, and I can't wait for the next episode. So, Chris, what do you think of Remembrance?
For me, it's such a strong opening. It really is. It took, yes, okay, it had the Basil exposition, but it was needed because I haven't watched short treks. I haven't watched or read the comic books. So they needed to bring me up to speed. It wasn't the best way, but it was still good. It planted enough questions to kind of, where is the story going? There's, as you said, there's hundreds of Easter eggs we probably missed, but the ones that we saw were fantastic because it made me, I kind of remember that. It's nice to be back in this universe. Not saying, like, it's been a while, and I'm not saying that Discovery, because I personally love Discovery, but Discovery is in the past. It's set in the past. This is set post Voyager, post Deep Space Nine, post The Next Generation, which is what I actually grew up on. So I didn't grow up on the original, the original Star Trek. So the first Star Trek for me was The Next Generation. My first captain was Picard. So it's nice to be back there. And I love the films. I know not everyone does. I know, but for me, it's a strong rebuilding of that universe. So I'm really happy and excited to see where we go with this. Derek, what about yourself? What did you think of the very first episode, Remembrance?
Oh, I love this. I absolutely love this episode, and finally getting to talk about it with you guys and finally hearing your thoughts. I'm really happy that you guys enjoyed it as much as I did as well.
Phew!
There's a tendency now for people to look at these types of things as properties that they want to make money out of, and what they do is give fanboys what they want. Well, I'm a fanboy, and what I wanted was a really well-written story starring Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard, and in one episode they've done that for me. So keep giving me what I want. I'll love it forever, and I'll keep watching all of your series and all of the connected shows. I'll keep buying all the stuff. I'll buy the hats, I'll buy t-shirts. I'll keep doing it as long as you give me great stories starring this character. I don't care about being serviced as a fan. Everybody loves to be serviced, right? So
Yes,
I don't mind.
do.
I don't mind getting fan service as long as it's done in a good way and written well. And I think this is done in a good way and written well. That's about all I could probably hope for. And I'm really happy to be going into a series that I'm more excited after the first episode than I was before seeing the first episode. That's a pretty good sign, right?
Yes.
Definitely.
And it is. As long as that keeps going, I'm going to be happy.
Excellent. Excellent. We have no feedback for this episode, but we are going to pay a visit to 10 Forward.
Yes, it is the Star Trek Picard pub quiz. And we are in 10 Forward.
Ooh.
So, fellow Trekkers and Trekkies, grab your Romulan ale and put on Star Trekking across the universe onto the 10 Forward jukebox, because we are coming back. So we started this in our Watchmen coverage where we did a pub quiz. One question each episode across the series. The question and answer is related to this episode. In our final wrap-up episode, we will announce the winner of the 10 Forward pub quiz.
10 questions in the 10 Forward pub quiz.
Exactly.
Really well done.
10 questions in the 10 Forward pub quiz. And of course, there will be a Star Trek themed prize for the winner. So the winner will be the person with the most correct answers, which again, we will read out in our final wrap up. So, fellow Trekkers and Trekkies, question number 1 from Remembrance. What common piece of jewellery does Dahj and her twin sister Soji have, and what does it represent?
Ooh.
So I think the represent is the most important thing.
Interesting. Very good, John. Very good. That's the first question from our table quiz. Please enter. You can enter by emailing us at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. And also, speaking of 10 Forward, did you guys see the interview with Patrick Stewart, who is being interviewed on The View, a show that Whoopi Goldberg is one of the presenters on, where he asked her to come and join him playing Guinan for season 2 of Star Trek Picard.
That it felt so staged, but I'm still so happy.
So happy. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Who cares if it was staged? I told
Exactly.
you.
I know it was staged, and I don't care.
I told you. I'm a fan and like to get serviced. That's the way things work.
We all like to get
Absolutely.
service.
Thanks so much again for joining us, fellow Trekkers and Trekkies. You can send any of your thoughts to us at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. Join the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. If you want to hear your voice of the podcast, you can also go to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com and record up to 90 seconds of your thoughts about the episode. You can also support us over on Patreon. If you would like to, you can go to patreon.com/tvpodcastindustries and support us over there.
Absolutely. Or please support us by sharing the podcast, subscribing, leaving a review, because sharing is caring, and sharing the podcast is, of course, sharing the love.
Yes, we'll be back next week for episode 2 of Star Trek Picard, Maps and Legends.
Bye-bye, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. Keep watching the stars.
Boldly go where no man has gone before, to episode 2.
Thank you so much for joining us, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. It's a pleasure speaking with you. And of course, remember, keep watching, keep listening, and another Star Trek reference, engage.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. when he is sought out by a mysterious young woman called Dahj.
Dahj.
Sorry. When he is sought out by a mysterious young woman called Dahl. How would you say her name?
Dahj. You had it right.
Dahj. Yeah, you had it right. Dahj.
Yeah, I think it was just my intonation. When he is sought out by a mysterious young woman called Dahj in need of his help. So like in a sense, if you think of, the competing empires or the competing worlds, like with Romulans, with the Cardassians, with I keep calling them the Kardashians.
I know.
With the Cardassians, what are they? It's Cardassians.
Yeah, Kardashians is the ship.
Yeah, Cardassians is the species.
Cardassians is the species.
Yeah.
That's why you see that his eyebrows are almost white when you do see Patrick Picard. Patrick Picard. I've completely thrown myself there. Excuse me. I've completely thrown myself.
Jean-Luc Picard.
No, I've forgotten his name.
Patrick Stewart.
And when you do see Patrick Stewart, he has grey eyebrows. So